right. Well, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Denise Harlow. I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at the National Community Action Partnership, and I am joined by my colleague.
Yes, I'm Ryan Gelman. I'm the Senior Associate for Public Policy and Advocacy here at the Partnership.
So first, thank you to the members of the Community Action Partnership through who your dues allowed us to budget for and hire our Senior Associate, and we're so excited that Ryan is here on board here at the Partnership and that we are able today to share with you the final board-adopted Community Action Partnership policy platform for 2019 through 2020. We are excited to be able to walk you through this here today, and I know a number of you may have been on with us, I think in December, where we presented a draft of the platform, and I will say that we made a significant number of changes to the document based on your feedback. You'll see an expanded section on housing. You'll see some modifications when it comes to immigration. You'll also see some softening, perhaps, of some language here or there. Maybe what would we say, a little depoliticizing or whatever that word might be.
Yeah.
I can't get it out of my mouth today. To really try to be reflective of your feedback. So, this policy platform is because of you in the Community Action Network. We took your feedback and embedded it in here, and I hope you see it reflected. And if you weren't with us in December, this may be all new to you, and that's fine as well. We want to walk through the core elements of the platform. Now, it is, what do we say here, 12 and a half pages long, right. So we're not going to walk through it all. We know you're adults, you'll be able to read it. It will be posted by the end of this week is the plan, along with the recording from today's webinar and the slide deck. Because we want you to be able to use this document, and I hold it up, and hopefully it won't look exactly like this. We want to make it nice, shiny, and pretty for you to use at your local agencies, with your boards, with your volunteers, with your staff, and with your elected officials. And we hope that you will use the slide deck for your own board meetings, for your own staff trainings. All of our stuff is your stuff. So we want you to be able to use it how you see fit. So just going to go to the next slide here. And this platform came out of our strategic planning process that we went through about 18 months ago. 2 of our 4 areas that came out as key focus areas focus on advocacy. The first was to elevate and expand national advocacy, and the second was to help encourage, build, and strengthen local advocacy. And we take advocacy at all definitions, right? Helping to be better advocates for customers who are sitting in front of us, all the way up to helping the network be better advocates with their House and Senate members on the Hill, right? And everything in between. And this document, we hope, will be a tool that will help connect you at the local agency level, the state association level, even the state CSBG office level. I know we have some state offices on today's webinar as well. That you can take this document and you can say, how can I embed the partnership's perspective on some of these pieces? Each of our sections has an introductory paragraph where we kind of frame and connect to a broader vision for a particular topic area, like housing, like an economy that works for all. We have kind of a definitive statement, and then we have a series of bullets. And we're hoping that local agencies, state associations, and state offices can find ways to use this document in creative ways. I didn't mute myself. Okay. So, as I mentioned, the board did approve. The board called on us as staff to develop this platform. We had a public policy committee. They met. We developed a frame. Ryan really jumped right in on his second day here, I think, when it was already starting to flesh stuff out. It went back to the network in December. It went back to our board in January. And then we did present it to the folks who were with us in Puerto Rico at our winter conference to say, here's our key points of our policy platform, please use it. And we said, well, not everybody could get to Puerto Rico, so we wanted to make sure we had this national webinar where we could walk through with a little bit more time to share with you and to respond to questions that you might have. So you'll see on your screen, we do have the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen. I encourage you to put in comments, questions, advice, try to make us laugh, I don't know, whatever you got. Put it into the chat window so we can try to make today a conversation a little bit. We do hope by the end of this week to post it up on our website. We'll have a refreshed kind of page for our policy and advocacy work, and we can't wait for you to see that. So this is a picture of the current draft of the policy platform. It is currently in Word, and again, we can certainly share this with you. So if you would like and don't have a copy of this, please email myself or Ryan, rgelman@communityactionpartnership.com or dharlow@communityactionpartnership.com, and we will email you a copy. We'll make sure that everyone who registered for today's webinar gets a link to the posting of it, as well as to the slides and to the recording. And so you'll see here that we have 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, 10 different areas in our policy platform. And some folks will say, Denise, why don't we just pick 3 areas? We'll advocate really hard for those 3 areas, and next year we'll pick another 3. That is one way to kind of tackle the breadth and depth of community action. But we felt since we're not the ones going on the Hill, David Bradley at NCAP is certainly our advocate and lobbyist on the Hill when it comes to CSBG weather and weatherization, that we wanted to take the broad stroke way of going. That community action, CSBG is our core funding. It is 100% of our identity in terms of being a CAP agency. We know what 80% of the network does weatherization, half the network does Head Start. There are a number of different programs, but we're more than that. Right? We are community action, and our mission is really to address the broad conditions and causes of poverty. And so this platform is broad because of that. Now, is it so broad that it actually captures probably everything? You guys do so much in the field that there's probably no way that we could capture every component of what we do as a network or what we care about or what we strongly believe in. But what we did is we tried taking the big stuff, some of the low-hanging fruit in some ways, but also stuff that we know resonates with a good chunk of the network. And again, we hope to do this on an annual basis, so keep in mind what you'd like us to maybe include for 2021 as we go through here today. We'll start off here in a moment. I'll come back to it, to CSBG and supporting David's work in reauthorization and increased funding. We talk, and you'll see here, framing it as the economy that works for all. You'll see family, health, and well-being. We are very conscious of using Frameworks Institute has done a lot of work on how we frame human services or frame poverty or frame the work that we do, and they talk a lot about family, health, and well-being. They talk about a construction metaphor. We've tried taking a lot of those themes and embedding this into this document so it has an external audience impact as well as internal. So you'll see that here in some of the ways that we frame some of our components. You'll see here providing equitable access to clean and affordable energy. And that triggers for me as well to make sure to remind you that we have embedded, you can see it on the picture there, this platform is based in the core values of community action, where we believe all people need to be treated with dignity and respect, that this country has a moral obligation to ensure the causes and conditions of poverty are addressed, and that we believe we can make a difference and end poverty in America. So you'll see equity framed throughout this document. That is a core value of the Community Action Partnership, and you'll see it embedded in our policy statements as well. You'll see here we talk about equity in criminal justice, in energy, universal health and well-being, strengthening community resilience. All these are kind of the top line pieces, and Ryan here in a moment is going to go through some of the more details, but you'll see in the document where we have, again, an opening paragraph and then a series of bullets that flesh out each of our sub-bullets. So let's start off here first with CSBG, and I'll say it right off the bat, right? We met with David Bradley and Tara Clark from NCAP. We walked through our platform back in December before we put it out in front of the network. This was built in part because David, as well as the network, said we got to be active advocates in community action. So he was supportive and thought it was a strong document, and we clearly start our platform with supporting CSBG, supporting David's ask to Congress for CSBG increases, and supporting his work on CSBG reauthorization. Those are the primary components that community action is concerned about and worried about, and wants to make sure that when you go visit your elected officials in Congress, that's on the tip of your tongue, CSBG and the value it brings to your organization. But as we said earlier, our policy agenda goes beyond CSBG weatherization, and we want to talk now about some of our other components as well. So Ryan, I'm going to turn it over to you to walk us through our first topic here, and I encourage folks on the phone, please put your questions, your comments in the chat window, and we'll pause periodically to reflect on them.
Yeah,
Ryan?
great. Thanks, Denise. So the first category here is creating an economy that works for all. I would also say, I think in this opening paragraph we have here, it's I think a lot of these bullet points here, economic justice. So it really is saying, give everyone a fair shot, regardless of like wealth or status or background. So some of those items include establishing a living wage, protecting various services and programs like SNAP benefits, Social Security, TANF, obviously. There was a push during this last budget cycle to protect and expand family-related tax credits, so like the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit. There's a bit in here about mitigating cliff effects, which some states and localities have had a really good track record in trying to change that. And then I think the other major thing on here is updating poverty measures to accurately reflect poverty in America, which we all know is higher than what some folks might think. And this comes up later on, but also protecting senior citizen well-being. There's a couple of bullets on that in the health and wellness section, but I just wanted to flag that here as well.
Because I know that that Social Security piece and making sure we look to firm up how our country supports seniors in our country, that's just going to become a growing issue as we see the aging of America. So that's going to be a significant issue. I just want to touch base here a moment on the TANF piece. I was lucky enough a couple of weeks ago to hear Catherine Eden speak regarding her book and research around $2 a day, where people across America are really living on no cash coming into their household, and the fallacy of welfare and the need that families need cash coming into a household to buy toilet paper, to help pay the rent, to pay for transportation. A lot of these programs and services aren't always provided through services. So the need for cash and TANF, we think, is a critical element. The EITC, we're in the middle of tax season. Or I guess we're in the beginning phases, I shouldn't say middle of, the beginning phases of tax season. And we know many of you have opened up your VITA sites, your voluntary income tax assistance sites. And we wanted to make sure we call out the need for increasing eligibility. We certainly support state EITC work, and so EITC, especially this time of year, is a big frame for community action. So let's move on to the next topic, providing equitable access to energy.
Yeah, so obviously here, just to start things off, we have weatherization assistance and LIHEAP at the top. Some interesting work has been going on around the country with percentage of income payment plans. And then also prioritizing research and funding around renewable energy sources and making sure that those are available to, everybody, communities of color, people with lower incomes. A lot of communities and state level work has been done on community level solar, and that kind of stuff. So I think that's important to keep in mind as far as energy goes. Also, I just want to flag here, we also talk about water. Access to clean water obviously is a huge issue, and especially in rural communities, access to wastewater services. And then we also have here sort of like a pair of items about telecom, advanced telecom, which includes rural broadband access, and then also infrastructure systems, which includes public transportation, importantly, but also roads and bridges and things like that. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to flag here.
And you touched on a little bit, that concept of environmental justice, I think, is a growing issue, and we want to make sure that we're also framing some of our work in that environmental justice frame, and again, that crosses over with the equity value that the partnership has. And again, supporting, you see right there off the bat, weatherization. We know David is pushing for increased funding for weatherization. We support that. We actually just met today with NEWAC and talked about LIHEAP and the importance of energy assistance for families. So there is so much work to be done in the energy space. And I know that leveraging new green energy technologies for low-income families, you mentioned solar. What can we do to make sure our families are benefiting from clean energy, that those technologies, that science doesn't pass by our families, and that our communities aren't benefiting from that as well. So there's a lot here on energy.
I would say, too, we're going to talk about this later on, and there's a community resiliency section, but also wrapped up in this, even though it doesn't particularly say it right here, I think this also speaks to the climate crisis, and a lot of the things in this section have to do with environmental factors. You know, obviously things that are preventative, that are going to help the climate crisis, like renewable energy, that kind of stuff. But this section also speaks to a community's ability to respond to those crises. You know, if you don't have broadband or like cell service, you're not going to get warnings or directions from your government about where to go, you know, emergency status, that kind of stuff. And obviously infrastructure, roads and bridges are crucial for that kind of stuff, as well as water. So just thought I'd mention that too.
We have several CAP agencies really becoming, in terms of water, access to clean water, in terms of and water energy assistance as well. A question has come in through the Q&A window about, more of a comment, that folks are beginning to see concerns even about broadband access in urban communities. And I'll say sometimes when you are in a big crowd or a big event, you can't get a text out, you know, you're thinking you're going to be able to use your phone to connect. You can't, because there's just not enough access. As we become more reliant on these technologies, that's something that we're really going to want to make sure we all have access to.
Especially in emergency situations, but that's sort of a different story.
But it is, but if we start relying on it, we're going to need it in emergency situations, and we need to make sure everyone's going to have access.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's move on to a section that really was expanded upon from the draft in December. We really took a deeper dive into housing, and so let's touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, sure. So obviously this is a huge issue for the Community Action Network. You know, I will say the prior housing section was a little bit limited. So the comments that we got were extremely helpful. We have more traditional housing items here, like the low-income housing tax credit, items about, you know, the CRA, that kind of stuff, and about housing production. But then we've also added expanding current housing initiatives at HUD and the Department of Agriculture, which are really important. And then we also have equity issues here about access to safe, affordable housing. We submitted comments actually to HUD about some changes they're trying to make in the Fair Housing Act discrimination regulations. And then we also added some language on evictions, which has become a huge problem, obviously. And on that front, we really are looking for more data collection on how many evictions are happening, who they're affecting, what the problems were, what led up to those evictions, and then expanding access to eviction services, either in the form of emergency crisis funds to keep people from being evicted, or greater access to, you know, like legal resources, court dates, that kind of stuff, to like make sure that people are allowed to stay in their homes as long as possible.
And for a lot of these groups, you know, the partnership is intending to go on the Hill, right? That's David's purview for CSBG, for Community Action, for Reauthorization. But we are supporting other coalitions and such. Under here, we want to mention Opportunity Starts at Home. We know a number of state associations and local agencies are members of Opportunity Starts at Home, so is the partnership. We've been attending their events. And by our participation in that, we're hoping to elevate the visibility of community action in that housing space. There is so much going on in this network around housing that we really, want the network to kind of get credit for that in some ways or shape, and get a little visibility and traction from a national perspective. So like some of the other categories, we do get involved, and Opportunity Starts at Home is one of those. Our next piece really gets to quality education, and workforce readiness really kind of across the lifespan. You know, we didn't really want to have just an early childhood section in here because we believe in the whole family approach. That's kind of where we've moved as a network, as the partnership as a technical assistance provider. We can still talk to Jen, and we know Head Start is kind of that original frame, but whole family really talks about, again, children along the spectrum of education, moving into young adulthood, good points in time for learning. Brain science tells us that, you know, that 0 to 3, but that 18 to 24, new parents, there are moments in time where there's truly a way to make a difference. And so we've kind of framed our early childhood stuff along with our workforce stuff here together. You want to talk about what we have here?
Yeah, absolutely. It just sort of made sense to, like Denise said, like pair these two things together. So they almost go by bullet here. You'll see there's Head Start, early Head Start, obviously, and then expanding quality after-school programs, and then we move into, like post-high school with debt-free public education, and then strengthening public education funding, and then, there's some stuff in there about tech and vocational schools, and then we move into increasing access to job training programs, and access to workforce readiness programs. So we really tried to sort of like get the whole spectrum of education and training for the workforce and being able to get a job that pays a living wage.
There's so much, and we know agencies are partners. Some of you are one-stop. Some of you are on the boards of your local workforce investment boards. We know there's that blend of you need to be a partner there. We sometimes know there's a financial ticket sometimes to that engagement as well. But we really look at trying to expand where we can make a difference in some of these spots around workforce training. So with that, I'm going to pause and kind of go back to the housing because a couple of comments have come in through the Q&A window around housing. The first piece was affordability in urban communities. We know affordability in gentrification. We know that, more than 50% of people living in poverty actually live in suburbs, which is impressing. You know, the cost of housing in urban communities is a pressure point. We know there are families doubling and tripling up in that space. The other comment that came through is that we need to make sure that when we talk affordability and housing, we're not forgetting or leaving behind homelessness, serving those who are homeless, trying to prevent folks from becoming homeless, but knowing that there are families, there are youth, there are adults, there are seniors who are homeless. And I know we talk in this document as well specifically about making sure that the federal departments expand the breadth of way they define homeless so that more programs and services can be provided to families who are homeless, and to try to, again, prevent those evictions so folks don't fall back into homelessness once they're stabilized. Is there anything else you'd want to add to those two?
Yeah, just we do have a bullet in there about definitions. I know HUD's definition is far more restrictive than HHS and I think agriculture as well. So we do have a bullet in there about that. I would also mention that we have in the beginning, like opening paragraph of the housing section, we do address affordable housing as a right and then preventing and eradicating homelessness as like an overarching goal of the section. So that wasn't mentioned in one of the bullets, but that is in that opening paragraph.
Good. Thank you for folks for putting your comments out there, and we appreciate it. It helps our presentation, I think, be a bit more direct in terms of what you want more information about. We want to talk now a bit about universal health and well-being, and again, prenatal, not even cradle, prenatal all the way through. And we know a number of agencies are federally qualified health centers. We know a number of you, certainly through Head Start, are doing screenings and providing health care services. Some of you have mobile health units and things like that going out into the community. But we have a number of things here that we want to talk about when it comes to health and well-being.
Yeah. So obviously the first bullet here is about universal health care coverage. We also have Medicaid expansion, affordable and safe prescription drug use, expanding mental health counseling was something that we heard from a ton of people, like meaningful access to mental health services. in both urban and rural communities. And then, yeah, community health centers. We have a bullet here about seniors again, and then a bit about the opioid crisis. Trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to mention here.
While you're looking at that, I will mention that where we are trying at the partnership to also move solidly into the social determinants of health space.
Yeah.
And that concept that if someone is hungry, if they are homeless or couch surfing, if they don't have a stable place to raise their family, all those components that build and add to the stress and even gets to toxic stress for families increases a person's individual health. And we know that there's research that shows we could live a mile apart from each other and have a 20-year different lifespan based on home, food, environment, energy, education. And again, that fits into this a bit, that whole social determinants piece.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the next slide. Establishing structural equity in the criminal justice system. We know that community action agencies are engaged in reentry programs. We know that your advocacy at the local level around Ban the Box initiatives, when it talks about, on job application forms, having to check a box whether or not you have been formally incarcerated, whether or not voting rights can be reestablished. There's a lot of room here when it comes to equity. What would you talk about when it comes to the criminal justice side?
Yeah, I would say structural equity is so important to the criminal justice system. I think that the ones that jump out at me from this, especially as far as equity are concerned, are the current cash bail system and the Ban the Box initiatives. I know also there's a huge fight going on in Florida right now about restoring voting rights for people who were previously incarcerated. Juvenile justice, I think, is a main point of this section as well, providing pretrial services or pretrial diversion programs so that not everyone is going through the criminal justice system if it's unnecessary, abolishing private prisons, and then also there's a bit in here about law enforcement training for implicit bias and de-escalation training, which I think also speak directly back to that point of structural equity in the system.
The whole private prison piece, right? Making profit off of prisons is just antithetical, I think is how you say that word, to where we stand. And the concept of once you've paid your debt to society, we need to welcome you back. We are a network, we are a country of second chances. And to reestablish that right to vote and civic engagement and the right to work is important. A couple of comments have come through the chat window that I want to sit here and pause for a moment. Is there new data on poverty linked with suicide, and any thoughts on that? Coming to the health and well-being section. I will reference, and it should have been in our e-news or will be soon. There was just an article in the Washington Post this week or last week that highlighted dairy farmers in the state of Wisconsin and the rate of suicide amongst dairy farmers, because the industry is such a hard industry right now, and the number of suicides is increasing at a dramatic rate. And actually, it highlighted a community action agency who is working with the community to help provide support for families to try to prevent additional suicides from happening. You're seeing growing rates of suicide in middle-aged adults, men and women, but more men. I was also just reading something recently also about young, 18 to 24, some of the increasing numbers, whether it's related to that lack of hope. And again, poverty plays into that stress that face people's lives. I don't know if you've seen anything recently to add to that.
I actually haven't, but now that's definitely something that I want to look into. I made a note for myself here about that. So.
Thank you for raising that. We'll make sure, I think it wasn't, but I'll have to look to make sure, Johnny, we included the the Wisconsin piece in our newsletter. If you don't get our newsletter, let us know too. We're happy to add you to the list. Someone also put in here, I'm not exactly sure, Dan, what your frame was. It says short-term transitional housing from private businesses. We have been seeing some businesses in some high-income communities or high expensive living communities creating their own housing for their employees. It kind of goes to back in the day, you know, mining companies would build housing and others would build housing for their own staff to live in. It is interesting to see that happen again, but with such wealth in parts of our country, you'll see people driving an hour, 2 hours so they can live here and work here. And so if you have more to put in here about that, what you mean by that, but I have seen that some companies are building housing. I've also heard that healthcare systems might be building housing as well. Again, we tell healthcare systems, don't build housing, turn to us. We can be much more efficient and cost effective and likely already know how to do it using low-income housing tax credits, other subsidies to build housing in high-income communities. So that is something also to think about. So I think those are all the questions that have come in. We have one more that I'm going to address as we start off this next section. Protecting immigrant families, immigrant community members. A comment came in early. Is there any feedback based on the Supreme Court's decision or the recent decision around public charge?
Oh.
And I know there's a webinar actually at the top of the next hour, 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific, done by Protecting Immigrant Families, which is CLASP and the National Immigration Law Center, where they're going to be diving into this decision to allow the public charge issue to go forward.
Yeah.
What would you add to that?
Just that, obviously I think it's unfortunate that happened. I mean, I think everyone was sort of heartened by the national injunction, like the nationwide injunction. I will say, unfortunately, because of this order, it's probably going to take a long time for the merits of these cases. I think there were, oh my gosh, I should know, but I think there were about 8 to 10 different complaints filed. So there's 8 to 10 cases in different parts of the country. Some are, states banded together. Some are single states, single communities. So we're going to have to wait and see what the outcome of the merits of those cases are, unfortunately, which probably will bring us past the November election, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think that order was, I didn't read the order, but I think it was a 5-4, I would assume. But
a lot is lately, isn't
yeah.
it? I'm scrolling through some of the comments and questions, but there are, just circling back here to the immigration issue, I mean, we did put in comments on the public charge issue.
Yes.
We know that while a physical wall is one thing, the invisible wall that is being built is real. And even if it gets torn down again, the fear has been created amongst families. We know families aren't coming in for health care that they need. We know they're not registering their kids for Head Start. We know that they're not coming in for services.
Before it even went into effect.
Yeah.
Or was planned to go into effect.
A comment here about back to housing, so you'll see why we expanded our housing section significantly, was access to affordable housing or affordable financial products discussed since the December webinar. I'm guessing that's around housing, affordable financial products?
There is, yeah, I think this might relate to a couple of different things. There is something in the education and workforce development section about financial management skills, like financial capacity training. And then there's also a quick mention about mortgage disclosure rules in the housing section. I feel like that could relate to either or both of those. Yeah, so those are addressed. If there's something else that's referring to that's not addressed, please let us know.
Someone else also put in here, the HUD Continuum of Care program provides direct emergency assistance. This could fit into our advocacy efforts for the housing section. Yeah, I think as we go forward, we probably need to look at the continuum of care, and maybe our advocacy document could help you at the local level when you're dealing with your continuum of care coalitions and some of those groups that are coming together, if that's helpful at all. But I think maybe that is something that we could look at putting into our parlance as well as the continuum of care process. Is there a universal description of what is affordable housing? That's a good question. I've heard different theories. What is it? HUD is about, no more than 33% of your income, or they ask you to pay 33% of your income if you're getting a housing. Again, I don't want to speak to that. I'm not an expert on HUD or the Housing Choice Voucher or Section 8. I know there's a school of thought that says no more than 25% of your income, but we also know that low-income families oftentimes are spending 50% of their income on housing. So I would go somewhere between that 25 and 33% in terms of affordable housing based on income, but that's just my layperson's perspective.
Yeah.
And again, someone is asking whether or not we are recording, and we are recording, and we'll share this with you as well as our slides, because we want you to use these slides with your board and with your staff. I think those are all the comments so far. I'm going to go to the next slide, which is around civic engagement. It's 2020, people. We have a census to get people counted for.
Yeah.
And we have an election coming up that we want people to register to vote for so they can participate. But we have elections every year in some states, in local communities. There are always somebody running for something. So we want to make sure our folks are engaged in civic engagement. What would you want to highlight from this section?
Yeah, I mean, certainly both of those, especially the census, obviously, complete count committees at your agencies. I think protecting the right to vote is, there's a lot in that one sentence. So I think that's really, sort of like community specific. I know different states have different rules, but it's always good to be involved in making sure that every voice is heard in a community. I've also read recently a lot of interesting articles about how engagement sort of like at the state and national level starts locally, and not just in elections, but getting involved in like a local organization, something with a board or being an officer somewhere. There's a lot of studies that show that doing that, like as a kid, but even as an adult, sort of like is your entrance into, being an engaged member of a democracy. So I think anything that we can do to instill those values is really important.
And the census is live. We encourage you to join the Community Action Complete Count Committee. You can email us. We'll make sure your name and email gets to Lindsay on our team. And I know we have staff today over at the Head Start Leadership Institute doing training to make sure that hard-to-count folks get counted through Head Start, because those 0 to 5-year-olds are one of the most undercounted folks in America. So we want to make sure that all of you are engaged in the census. Email us if you want to be part of our Complete Count Committee. And finally, we finish up our platform with a broad-based kind of conversation about community resilience. I think we touched on this one a little bit earlier when we talked about the energy piece, but we know resilience goes beyond energy. Low-income families are the canary in the mine, right? If something's going wrong, I remember knowing that there's an old video from 2006 of a training that I was a part of, and we were talking about the mortgage crisis before, because we were talking about CAP agencies doing mortgage, default prevention counseling as a significant new expanded program because of default, and that was before things really hit the fan in the aughts during the major recession. So what else would you say here around community resilience and community action? I think the point of this is just that it's important to have or do everything that you can to make sure that there are procedures in place to deal with rising crises. They can be, national, local, state level. But this is really about it is partially about the substance of what those particular crises, the characteristics of those particular crises. But I think what's really important is just having these procedural safeguards in place in your community so that when something arises that's unforeseen, you have the ability to address it in
a way that includes everyone in the community and in the sort of decision-making process, but also that doesn't leave anybody behind substantively. Yeah.
Circling back here then to some questions. Thank you, Ryan, for that. Question has come in, did you think about adding any language to include voter registration by people in communities that we serve? I will, refer you to cap law on some of the issues around voter registration. We know there's some issues with CSBG, but we also know in the Head Start Reauthorization Act, it clearly talks about Head Starts being able to do voter registration, using outside groups to come in and do the voter registration. We can use Head Start sites to do voter registration with the League of Women Voters, for instance, who can come in and use your space. We do have a statement in here about protecting the right to vote for all Americans and cultivating voting as a popular form of engagement, and we believe that we need to be vigilant in protecting the right to vote. This is a policy platform more for advocacy purposes, but you're right, I'm wondering, encouraging voter registration is something that we would hope that agencies would find a way to make sure that families vote and that families get registered. There are some CSBG restrictions on that, and again, I would refer you to cap law on some of those specifics, but we know if you're a Head Start provider, you can use your Head Start site to do voter registration using the League of Women Voters. Let's figure out what we can do to make sure that families, and hopefully everyone on this webinar is registered to vote. But if you're on this webinar, you care about policy, and my guess is you probably are registered to vote. So, you know, I turned 18, all right, I gotta go register to vote.
Yeah.
I geek here. So, let's see if there's any other comments. What else would you say about the policy platform writ large, or what our next steps are? While I look for any last comments, put them in the chat window or the Q&A window, folks, and we'll try to circle back here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one note I want to make is about we're still finalizing a procedure moving forward for like the next platform, whether it's going to be on a 2-year basis. I know a lot of the platforms that organizations have are on a 2-year basis that mirror the congressional legislative sessions. There was talk about possibly having some procedures in place if we want to respond quickly to you know, something that comes up in the news that wasn't in the platform, or possibly the ability to amend the platform mid-session. I think those are important conversations to have, and we're going to have those moving forward. We just don't have an answer yet on those. And just as far as the platform is concerned generally, I think we think of this as a foundation for how local and state agencies and associations can get involved and engage with policy at a local and state level. Obviously, NCAF does the Hill work for us at a national level, but I think this is more not about specific bills or provisions, but just like a baseline set of values that we hope can be helpful as people start or continue or expand engagement in their local communities.
Another comment came through the window from Jim Masters. Many of you know Jim. He is offering to come out to state associations and other conferences and do training on protecting the right to vote and talking about why voter registration is so critical. And so email me. We're happy to connect you with Jim on that as well. So thank you, Jim, for being on the webinar. Thank you for all you're doing on the census and encouraging and protecting the right to vote. You'll see here that we want to highlight the NCAP conference, because again, if you're on this webinar, you care about policy. And this, if you haven't been to an NCAP conference, I encourage you to come. It is an amazing experience to be with hundreds of your colleagues who care just so deeply about this work and understand that you got to go upstream. You got to change the direction of policies if you're going to help families at the local level. It really is macro change. So I hope that you'll think about coming in March to the NCAP conference. And I know Ryan was talking here about some of the next steps. It will be up on our website. It'll look hopefully shiny and pretty. It'll be nice.
Yeah, shiny and pretty for sure. But also, I think this can be a foundation for agencies, but also for us, it's going to be the foundation of a new policy tab on the website. So first of many policy resources, hopefully, that will be available to folks there.
So thank you for being on today. We will post this, we'll send out the slides, we'll send out the recording and the final draft of the platform to everybody. We'd love to see what you do with this. If you are doing your own state association platform, please send it to us. If you're doing your own local agency stuff, send it to us. If you find that you have a slide deck that you're using with your board, send it to us. We'd love to see it, maybe incorporate pieces of it.
Yeah.
We'd love to come out to your state association conferences and share this platform. So if you would like Ryan or myself to kind of come out and do the live show on this, we're happy to. Please ask. We train cheap-ish. We do ask for a little bit of support there and certainly helping to support our travel, but we would hope that maybe some folks might be interested in that as well.
And I would just add to, just continue to email me with like comments, questions. I mean, this is the final for now, but it's an evolving document, so definitely keep bringing things to my attention.
And again, so thank you, Community Action. This wouldn't have been possible without your push, your nudging, your support through your dues, and through your attendance at our events. So we look forward to seeing where this takes us next, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.